Moving into our last story of the day. If you haven't already hit that like and subscribe button, folks, please do. We have the Supreme Court poised to overturn affirmative action president's key activist forecast. Now, this is quite interesting because I am not a fan of affirmative action. I actually think it's racist. I think it's wrong that you're going to allow somebody to get hired by a job or being led into a university or institution based on the color of their skin to meet certain diversity quotas, and you're kind of screwing over somebody else. So say a black person gets in because they need to increase the diversity quota of black people, but you're going to throw out an Asian student that's qualified to be at that university compared to maybe a black person that's not qualified. And that could go any direction. You could say a white person that's underqualified to go to that university to meet the white quota, and you're going to screw the black person or the Asian person who's more qualified than that white person to go to the university. I mean, regardless of race, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. Merely just giving examples. I think it's wrong, and hell, I think it's racist, and I don't think it should be implemented. Folks, look how Karine Jean-Pierre got her job. We shellac that all the time, every week. She didn't know how to do her job, but it was diversity quota she had to be put in. Activists behind the push to end affirmative action are confident that the Supreme Court will overturn precedents upholding race-conscious admissions following oral arguments on Monday. God, I hope they do. Students for Fair Admissions, a legal advocacy group which opposes granting applicants an advantage because of their racial identity, has filed complaints against both Harvard University and the University of North Carolina. Harvard University has been in the mix for quite some time. This is not the only time they've received complaints or at least legal issues regarding affirmative action. So both for employing racially and ethnic discriminatory policies and procedures when accepting students. The lawsuit against Harvard argued that Asian American students required significantly higher standardized test scores than their peers to gain admission to elite schools. Regardless of the impact that's going on at home, they had to still perform better on the standardized test than other races, and they were still being rejected in favor of the other races because they needed to meet a diversity quota. That's crazy. You're being judged purely by your race rather than the character of who you are and your test scores. I mean, that literally goes against Dr. King's whole message. Justice Clarence Thomas and his conservative-leaning colleagues were skeptical that racial diversity truly offers educational benefits and appeared to find arguments offered by North Carolina State Solicitor General Ryan Park largely unpersuasive. Actually, the data goes against what affirmative action speaks about. Heather McDonald does a fabulous job here of detailing this out in conjunction with Thomas Sowell through his books, specifically Diversity and Disparities from Thomas Sowell. Great book, pick it up. But it talks about basically looking at this discrepancy in affirmative action where you're having certain, regardless of skin color, just pick any skin color, if they're not qualified to get into that university, what happens is they tend to actually drop out or they unperform, against the general public in terms of those that got in, rightfully so, based on their test scores. They underperform them by a lot. And like I said, a lot of them just end up dropping out after 2 years because they shouldn't be going there in the first place because they're not qualified just based on, I hate to use the word intelligence, but for the purpose of kind of getting my point across, their intelligence level is just not up there where it should be compared to those that actually got in based on the performance of which they should have got in for. So those that are just getting in purely based on race are underperforming by a lot. Cool. I thought it was a very deeply engaging argument, he commented. I remain hopeful that the arguments that both of our attorneys made will be persuasive to the court and that ultimately the court will strike down the use of race and ethnicity in college admissions. Bloom referenced several examples of universities largely attended by a particular racial group, including Spelman College, a historically black school, and the University of Texas San Antonio, a predominantly Hispanic college, and said one would have difficulty proving that students' experiences are diminished by a lack of peers belonging to other ethnicities. You've even heard college campuses doing separated racial graduations. They have segregated dorms. It is amazing to see how the progressive left and Democrat Party are literally reverting back to how they used to be in history by wanting segregation once again. Talk about history repeating itself. There you go. It goes on to say, Color Us United President Kenny Xu, who was instrumental in encouraging students of California to overwhelmingly reject a ballot measure that would have returned affirmative action to the state, told the Daily Wire that schools embracing affirmative action violate two sacrosanct principles of the American experiment. Quote, the first is, don't treat anybody by your race. You should be treated by the content of your character, not the color of your skin. God, that sounds like a lot of what I just said in Dr. King's message. The second is meritocracy as the basis of the American dream. That is why immigrants come to this country, because they believe that they are not going to be treated on the basis of their background, because this is the land of opportunity and that will give you a chance to work hard and make it in this country. Progressive left doesn't think so, folks. They don't even believe in the American dream. They think that people are automatically oppressed based on the color of their skin when they arrive at this country or they're born out of the womb. That you can't rise up, that since the dint of birth, you're going to be oppressed by institutions out there because institutions are racist. What institutions? They can't say it. Who are those institutions that are racist? They can't say it. How long have they been racist? What policies, what laws in the books are racist? They can't say it. It's just there's racism out there in the ether. There's some nameless, faceless, shadowy figure that wants to oppress you and hold you down, but they can't point towards it. Several analyses have uncovered the disadvantages faced by Asian Americans in college admissions processes seeking to reserve places for Black and Hispanic students. Check this out. One study from 2009 concluded that Asians required an SAT score of roughly 140 points higher than white applicants, 270 points higher than Hispanic applicants, and I hope you're sitting down for this one, 450 points higher than Black applicants, according to a report from the Asian American Coalition for Education. That is so wrong, it's ridiculous. Somehow, though, that's not racist, you guys. Somehow, that's completely acceptable to the Democrat Party and the progressive left. If they are excelling greater than other races, regardless of race, you met the qualifications based on character to get into that institution. I'm not saying there aren't other metrics that we can look at here, but if you're going strictly based on race to meet a certain quota, God, that sounds a hell of a lot racist to me. You had the person go on and say who was in attendance while the Supreme Court heard oral arguments, noted that strong majorities of Asian, Hispanic, whites, and a near majority of Black voters in California rejected the affirmative action measure, implying that the issue extends beyond ethnic lines. Indeed, nearly 3/4 of Americans believe colleges and universities should not consider race or ethnicity when making decisions, admission decisions to be specific, according to a Pew Research poll. It's not going to stop them from continuing to push this, and I can see a lot of backlash coming from the left. Steven Crowder has done a great Change My Mind on affirmative action. I highly recommend you all go check that out. We need a really strong ruling from the Supreme Court, not just the unsurprising ruling that Harvard is discriminating, that they need to stop doing that. We need to establish some principles. We didn't choose to be born Asian, and what Harvard is doing is by trying to judge us on something we cannot control is basically making us ashamed of being Asian. That's really sad because no one should be ashamed of their race in this country. Absolutely agree. Harvard's policy forces that into consideration. Legacy media outlets centered this coverage of the Supreme Court cases on Blum and his conservative leanings. One article from CNN said that he had designed the arguments to reach a friendly Supreme Court, although Blum affirmed that opposing affirmative action is a policy that crosses racial and partisan lines. There's an old expression, every lawsuit needs a villain, and the corollary to that is every lawsuit needs a hero. I see myself as neither a hero nor villain, Blum commented. Sometimes media outlets look for a human angle as opposed to concentrating and focusing on the legal issues and the policy issues. It's a bit of an intellectually lazy way of going about making a story more interesting. I definitely think there is some truth to that, but the main focus is that you have these universities that are pushing affirmative action and basically screwing over somebody for literally their ethnicity or the color of their skin, which is crazy to me. And it's crazy that the Democrat Party historically has done some very bad things. I don't know, Ku Klux Klan, segregation, slavery was predominantly a Democrat thing. I'm not saying there weren't Republicans that did it, but God, they were few. They were really, really few and far between. It's mostly the Democrat Party, and it's just interesting how they are still going towards not just a metaphorical plantation, but wanting to still freaking screw people over based on the color of their skin. I mean, history repeats itself, folks, does it not? But hell, you're still going to have people that think Joe Biden's doing a good job. You're still going to have people that want to vote blue, even though they're pulling this kind of shenanigans. And they complain about the diversity quotas. They complain about racism. They complain about all these things, which they should complain about. Nobody likes racism. Nobody likes people being judged based on the color of their skin. They should be judged based on the character. But that's not what they believe in. So at one end, they believe this, but on the other end, it completely contradicts their whole story. They do the same thing with free speech. Oh, we want free speech for everybody, except those that go against our narrative. It's the same ideology. It's all hypocrisy at the end of the day, folks. They're about to be shellacked at the polls, these midterms, with a red wave. For every 8 to 9 new Democrats, or rather Republicans, there's one new Democrat, folks. I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Bald Brad Show. If you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all our future content.